Yeah, I sent the people. Okay, so I figured, I want to talk about vulnerability and weaknesses and that whole thing and being vulnerable. I just saw a clip on Shan Boody's Instagram where she posted a clip from a podcast where these guys were talking about whether vulnerability is a weakness. So one guy was trying to make the point that vulnerability is weakness. And, kind of got me thinking about that sort of stuff. So yeah, big up Shan Boody for posting that, and big up to the guys involved. I didn't see the full podcast. I don't know what the whole thing was about, but just this clip I saw and that got me thinking. But anyway, if you'd like to hear me talk about vulnerability, stick around because I want to talk about. So yeah, I think it's time for another serious Sunday video, and as what has become somewhat of a tradition, I don't post these on Sundays, so there we go. But yeah, so in the clip that I saw, one gentleman was talking about vulnerability being a weakness, and he was trying to make the point that it's a weakness, but he kept getting cut off by this other person. He kept interrupting, so he didn't make his full points, at least not in the clip. Maybe in the full podcast he makes a full point, but in the clip it doesn't really come across. But it seems out of the words that he was able to get across in that clip that he was trying to make the point that vulnerability is a weakness, but that's not necessarily the problem. And if that's so, then yeah, that is something that I would say I agree with, because it's something that I've kind of felt for a while, that we kind of often talk about weaknesses as in overcoming weaknesses. When you recognize you have a weakness, you need to overcome it. And I've always kind of felt for a while that that isn't necessarily what you need to do, at least not in every single circumstance, because ultimately we are not perfect, right? We're never going to be perfect, and trying to be perfect is fundamentally or ultimately going to be an exercise in futility. So yes, we need to recognize our weaknesses, and there are certain weaknesses we're going to need to overcome, but we are always going to have some weakness, but that isn't necessarily the problem. Identifying which weaknesses you need to overcome and which weaknesses you need to get help on, I think, is really going to be that key. So for example, let's say you want to be a chef, right? And your weakness is that you can't handle knives very well. It's kind of an issue if you're going to be a chef. So overcoming that and learning to get good at using knives is going to be important to you. Whereas if you're trying to be a chef, but then you have a weakness in maybe you don't understand, business logic super well. Okay, that's something you can get help on. That's not necessarily something you need to overcome. That's something you could ask for help on. But in the case of vulnerability, it's kind of the same, but it's also kind of different as well. Because when we talk about vulnerability, we're really talking about emotional vulnerability. And there are always going to be things that you struggle with emotionally. There's always going to be things that you don't struggle with emotionally. Some things that will happen, maybe a bad situation happens and you're totally fine, and you maybe dealt with it before, maybe you haven't dealt with it before, but it's just something that you're fine with, you can get along with it. But there's other things that happen and emotionally you need help on. But where I think both those kind of intersect is trust, because especially when it comes to emotional vulnerability or weaknesses, whether it's emotional or business, trust can be important. But I think where it kind of intersects is trust, because when you look to get help with something, it needs to be from somebody that you can trust. And this is where I think a lot of times we kind of mess up, because those of us who are maybe trying to be more open with people, we don't always realize that you can't be open with everybody. And there are people who you absolutely need to be closed off from, because when you open up to them, they will abuse that trust. They will, maybe not right away, maybe not in the most obvious ways, but at some point they will abuse that trust. And these are often people who have continually shown to you that you can't really trust them with certain things. But we kind of have this thing about, because maybe you've known them for a while, or because maybe they're in a position of authority, or maybe the most common one is that maybe because they're your boss, we said that already, or maybe because they're a family member, a relative, a brother, a mother, a father, a sister. We think because somebody is related to us that we want to be able to trust them. And a lot of us kind of grow up in that whole thing about family first kind of mentality. This is your uncle. You gotta love your uncle. This is your auntie. You gotta love your auntie. This is your mother. You gotta, that sort of thing. We kind of grow up in that, and that is very much an ideal. It's not always the reality for a lot of us, where we can't necessarily trust certain people, in particular sometimes family members, with certain things, but we kind of feel like we want to, or that we have to. So we maybe open up to somebody time and time again, and that person time and time again at some point abuses that trust. And maybe not in a malicious way, maybe it's not always, they're trying to get you. Sometimes it's just personalities and how people are. But whether it's malicious or whether it's just, how they think you're supposed to be in life, doesn't really matter. The end result's the same, in that they've taken something that you've trusted them with and used it to hurt you. And I think when we recognize that some people you just cannot trust, we need to recognize those aren't the people we need to be opening up to. Because I feel like when it comes to asking for help, and especially when it comes to asking for help with emotional things, that's a privilege. That not everybody has that privilege to hear your problems. And a lot of times people, especially when it comes to things like family or people know you for a long time, they feel like they have some kind of entitlement over you to know what's going on in your life. So they'll say things like, "Yeah, you could tell me anything. Oh, what's going on? Are you okay?" They'll say all the right things, like that kind of stuff, because they feel some kind of entitlement to know what's going on in your life. The truth is, they're not entitled to anything. And if they haven't really shown that you can trust them, then they're really not entitled to anything at all. But they will feel that kind of entitlement. They feel like they should know what's going on in your life. And not necessarily because they deep down want to help you. It's because that, or at least in some cases, because they just want some kind of ammunition to use against you. They already have a low opinion of you, or they don't necessarily think particularly highly of you. And knowing your problems or knowing the things that you're going through just gives them that much of a proof that you're really not that good a person. So eventually one day they'll say something about, yeah, see, that's why that happens. They'll use it in that kind of way. And again, not always in a way that they're trying to be malicious because they hate you so much. It's not always that simple. It could be just, again, personality things, but doesn't matter. End result is the same. So yeah, vulnerabilities and weaknesses, I think, yes, that is true. I think when you have a vulnerability, that is ultimately a weakness, and we all have them, but that isn't the issue. We all have something that we're vulnerable about. We all have something that we're not good at, or some kind of weakness. That's not the issue. There's always going to be there. It's just understanding who you can talk to those things about, who you can ask for help, whether it's a business thing or emotional thing or any kind of thing. It's understanding who you can trust to ask for help. And you, by the way, you do need to ask help from somebody. You can't just bottle these things up and be like, no, I'm never going to talk to anybody, I'm never going to trust anybody, I'm never going to be open up to anybody. Because if you take that kind of attitude, then you never really know anybody. And another clip that Shan, big up Shan Boody again real quick. Another clip that she posted on her Instagram where they're talking about a similar thing about vulnerability, and one guy was saying that he doesn't open up to anybody because he knows that, or it's that one time that you can use it against him, that that would cancel out everything else. And Shan Boody was trying to make the point that you kind of have to. Well, I think she was trying to make the point. Let me not speak for her, but I think she was trying to make the point that you kind of need to open up in some cases, because as much as there is that possibility you can get hurt, ultimately is that you need to open up to people so that you can know them better and they can know you better. Because if you never ever open up to anybody, then you always have that kind of distance. And if you're in a relationship or any kind of well, I say relationship as in boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, but whether it's that or any kind of relationship, business relationship, partner relationship, any kind of relationship, family relationship, any kind of coming togetherness of two or more people. I don't judge, but any kind of coming togetherness or any kind of relationship, there needs to be that trust. There needs to be that, because if you don't have that, if you never really open up, then they'll never really know you. You never really don't know them, and you don't really have anything in the end. It's just acquaintances. So yes, it's difficult. It is difficult, and there are going to be times that you get it wrong, where you open up to somebody and that person hurts you. They use it against you, and they use it against you in the worst ways. And then you kind of have to be a bit careful about who you open up to. But you do need to open up to people so that you can know them and they can know you. And hopefully you can find the people that you can trust with those things, that don't use it against you just because you got into an argument or you made a mistake somewhere and everything. And by the way, I know everybody gets things wrong, and when it comes to arguments and anger, we are going to say stuff that we don't necessarily mean at the moment. So I guess these things can happen regardless. But you know, then there's things like taking accountability, understanding that you've messed up. Sometimes people will use things against you and not understand that that is not a good thing to do, and they'll never take any kind of accountability or any kind of responsibility for that. Other times people might say something that you trust them with and use it against you, but they don't understand that that's not a good thing, and they'll apologize for it. And I think it's a massive difference between somebody recognizing they've done something wrong and somebody not understanding that they've done something wrong. So that's another thing as well. But you know, I'm not suggesting just cut everything off just because they made one mistake. I mean, we're all going to get things wrong, and that's just kind of how that is. But you know, you need to be able to be vulnerable. You need to be able to be willing to kind of take that risk with people, but to be careful about who you take that risk with. And certainly anybody who's consistently shown themselves that, say it, don't spread it, but certainly anybody who's consistently showed themselves as whether it's untrustworthy or you know, you just can't, you know, they're constantly using things against you. Again, whether that's malicious or whether that's just their personality, you know, those are people that you kind of need to love from a distance, you know, whereas other people who show that they're at least trying, look, we're going to get things wrong, but at least trying to you know, help, trying to support, and then, you know, same from you, that you're helping them, you're supporting them, and you know, it kind of all goes in sync. And they might make a mistake, you might make a mistake, but you acknowledge that and you talk together, you work it out, this, that, and the other, you know, then it's okay. It's never going to be pain-free, right? It's never going to be pain-free, but you know, at least there's certain people that can help with the pain, whereas other people just exacerbate that pain. So yeah, vulnerability is a weakness. I would say that. I think vulnerability is a weakness, but I don't think that is the issue. The issue is just how we handle those and who we choose to share those weaknesses with, and how we handle situations where people abuse those weaknesses, but understanding that as much as it can hurt, that we still need to expose, if you will, our weaknesses to people so that they can know us and we can know them. Because if you don't, then it's just, yeah, you know, it's just two people that sit together but not really coming together. So that's probably not the right hand gesture to use. But anyway, I think you get what I'm trying to say. But yeah, let me know what you think of that. I'll post some clips, links to the clips I'm talking about. And yeah, big up Shan Boody one more time, because yeah, why not? But yeah, let me know what you think. Drop any recommendations, suggestions in the comments, send them through and I'll see what I can do. Like, share, subscribe, because we're doing this 10-year Get Me fam. Got more videos on the screen. Check out my other channels as well, be much appreciated. But that's gonna be it for the minute. So guys, until whenever, if ever, peace.